All right, good to go.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Veg Networking, where vegan, plant-based professionals connect and collaborate. We are thrilled to have two special guests with us today. They are UK natives, world travelers, animal rights advocates, lovers of the great outdoors, especially the snow, and you'll get to know a little bit more based on where they are. And they are the recipient of the Small Business BC 2021 Youth Entrepreneur of the Year Award. We have with us the co-founders of BReD, or Ed's BReD, as wildly known on the web, Natasha Tatton and Ed Tatton. Welcome.
Thanks,
Hello.
Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
That was quite an intro.
Yeah.
You guys have both picked up a lot of steam since you're, as I call it, an iconic business in the Whistler area, started not too long ago. So why don't we start back at the beginning with our first conversation starter, which is, what is your plant-based or vegan origin story?
I've worked as a fine dining chef since my whole career, since I was 13 years old. I always had an interest in food, and especially like vegetables and vegetarian food, because a lot of the time it can be sort of like put aside on a menu. And then when I met Tash, she was vegetarian, and it just grew from there, really. And just to fast forward, once we got to Whistler, I worked at Outer Bistro, farm to table restaurant, again using lots of local farms, and had been making sourdough previously in the UK, and then brought that to the restaurant. Started making sourdough. Started BReD, actually just selling sourdough to the local community. And then fast forward another 2 years, that grew and grew. And Tash and I wanted to start a business. We were both vegan, and it kind of just snowballed from there, really.
Yeah, we didn't go vegan until we moved to Whistler. And it was about 2014 that we started to make vegan choices. But I didn't really know that it was termed vegan. I was just cutting out animal products from my diet. And then I think once you start watching a few movies, I think probably Cowspiracy was one at that time that had quite a big impact on us, because we've always been quite environmentally focused, like using eco products and that, happy to pay more if it's better for the earth and that kind of thing. And so once you start to make the connections and then realize, like, oh, this is vegan. Oh, I'm vegan. Then you start getting comfortable with that word. But it was a long transition for both of us. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't like we did a Veganuary challenge and it was the 1st of January. And lots of people have that, and it's so nice. They get this sort of anniversary to celebrate. We don't really have that, but we've been vegan for years now, so never looking back.
Yeah, and we're an inclusive group here, and of course there's no competition, there's no judgment or anything like that. But since I think you said 2014, really, when those decisions started to really solidify, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's quite a long time. So, second question is based on your entrepreneurial origin story. Maybe it's the same for both of you. Maybe it's independently different. Happy to hear from both. But what you mentioned, Ed, about back in the UK baking bread, I think it was something related to a yoga studio, or
that's in Whistler. That was
that was kind
local yoga.
That was here. So I'd already, I wasn't part of this whole 2020 sourdough sort of like boom.
Nice.
I've been making sourdough since 2008, and before then I made bread at catering college and things like that. So when I came to Whistler, I sort of had more time on my hands. I wasn't working as much, so started making sourdough and taking that to the local yoga studio. And once people smelt fresh bread, I was basically exchanging it with the owner, Tina, for a yoga pass. So it was good for her, good for me. And then people were like, where can we buy this?
They could smell the bread in the yoga studio, and they were, when can we get some of this bread? And so Ed thought, oh, maybe I could make 30 loaves at the restaurant and sell them to the yogis and a few friends. Didn't expect it to.
Yeah, I kind of had access
to get so popular
to the kitchen, which is really good. I mean, a lot of people always say, what would you recommend for young entrepreneurs starting out? Literally, I put in maybe $1,000 to buy some tins, buy a little bit of equipment, It was really cheap rent because they were doing me a favor at the restaurant. They don't open for lunch, so it was perfect. I had all morning to prep the sourdough, put it in the fridge, do my shift, and then the next morning I'd bake it fresh, and customers would come in, pick it up from the bar, and I'd just bake all morning. And I loved the fact that the kids could see where the food was being produced. There was no plastic. It was buying the flour in paper bags and baking the bread, giving it back to them in paper bags. And that grew, like Natasha said, starting at 30, all through Facebook, all done on trust. So it's very similar to like a farmer's market style, cheap rent, low overheads, and then direct customer feedback, which was really nice. They were like, you could see like, what people were buying, how much they were prepared to spend. And then they started asking, when are you going to open a shop? So it really sort of like got me thinking, like I wanted to open a restaurant all my life as a chef, but it was something along the lines of Alta Bistro, but Whistler's food scene is a little bit behind Vancouver. And also restaurants cost so much. So we were like, oh, maybe a bakery could work. There's definitely a gap there. There's no vegan places except for Green Moustache, which is more sort of juices and salads. So we were like, okay, with my fine dining background and, understanding of flavors and textures, maybe I can make a few cookies and cakes and the sourdough can be the main thing.
Yeah.
So
when the community was saying, oh, are you going to open a bakery? We sort of started to think about it and said, okay, yeah, we can open a bakery. And in our minds, we're like, it's all going to have to be vegan though, because we can't profit from animal cruelty. So the great thing is we already had the Whistler locals on board, so they didn't need to know it was vegan, or not like we hide it, but we didn't need to put it in their face. We knew they were going to support us and just trust that our products were good. So that was, it's kind of take some of the customers, it's taken a really long time to figure out that we're vegan, and that's kind of nice because they're already converted by then. And then when they sort of realize like, oh, but I like this and this is vegan, then they kind of start thinking, I might like other vegan things. You never know where they're going to go with that. So it's kind of cool. But we are starting to think about becoming a bit more bold as a vegan business, because we have noticed a big shift in what consumers are looking for. Nowadays, we're getting a lot of people coming in asking what's vegan, and they don't trust that everything is vegan. So we feel like we're sort of starting to think about getting a certification, and also more direct branding, that kind of thing. So it's been quite interesting to see how the customer has changed in the last couple of years.
Yes, and we're definitely going to get into those questions, some trend questions, where's your business going in the future questions. But correct me, when you announced the location that you were going to open a bakery, it wasn't like, hey, warm welcome, this is going to be easy for you guys. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so we had a rough size of space that we were looking at. We knew how big the oven was going to be, and certain pieces of equipment, and we knew the rent was crazy expensive. So we did look in Pemberton, we looked in Squamish, we looked in the main village, but the village was crazy. And then we live in Creekside, and I remember just walking through and just seeing all these like new sort of for lease signs, sort of poking our eyes through the windows, seeing the size of the spaces, and then we just reached out to the new landlady.
We saw in the paper, the Peak local news magazine, that there was a new landlord, and she was really passionate about reviving Creekside, which is where we live, and having independent, locally owned businesses. And she wasn't interested in having any big chains. So we thought, this is our opportunity. We'd seen the Creekside village sit empty for years, and it had baffled us because there's free parking, there's a bank, a gym, a supermarket, liquor store, all the amenities, bus stops, Valley Trail access, first stop from Vancouver. It's just, there's a gondola there. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't that location work? Because a bakery relies on footfall. Well, there is footfall in Creekside. So we kind of saw the potential, but a lot of the locals had given up thinking that anything would ever work in Creekside. They said, why are you opening there? It's a dead zone. No one goes to Creekside. Nothing's happening. And it was just like fail, fail, fail. And I'm thinking, and you don't even know that our business is vegan. I mean, we're really going out there. But actually, Ed and I have been through this before. When we bought our home in the UK, we bought it in an area that was considered a ghetto. And we had the same feedback then. Why are you buying in that area? It's a ghetto. And we could see the potential. Again, it was located near a train station, a school, shops, restaurants. And we thought, well, this area's got to be up and coming at some point. And luckily it did come up the ranks, and that's where we got the capital to start the bakery. So we'd kind of been through that before, and it's just kind of like, it almost drives us to prove people wrong, I guess. It's quite kind of exciting. It's like, oh, I'm really glad you think that. You're going to be really surprised really soon.
What did I miss?
Oh, it's back.
You're back.
The whole answer.
All of it.
Perfect. Based on the kind of reception that you got where you were going to set up shop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of, and that has dwindled out, like not so many, because now we've kind of proved ourselves. It's definitely people understand it, but there's other places in Whistler that are the same. Main Street, where there's a lot of independent places, where Outer Bistro is, Mount Curry Coffee Shop. These apparently, 7 or 8 years ago when they moved in, it was the same thing. So I think once people realize, well, actually, it comes down to, is the business good enough? Is the concept good enough? So it's not really the area. I think also there's restaurants all over the world where, 2-3 Michelin star places that people will drive to out of their way for hours and hours if it's good enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, probably hit the nail on the head. That community is probably hard to earn trust, hard to break into, but once you do, it's like the trust is over the moon, the love is over the moon, the support is over the moon, which is what you're experiencing right now. So in your business, very unique, like vegan, sourdough, bakery, that in and of itself is unique. But I guess like from a restaurant or bakery perspective, what are some trends that you're noticing in your industry?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, definitely the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in people either making sourdough themselves or taking an interest or having a friend or family member that was making it. And I think that gave people a much higher appreciation of the craft, because a lot of people just, gave up. They're like, you know what, I'm going back to work now. This is way too much effort. So I think that really helped us. It gave people an appreciation. And also comparing us to other vegan bakeries or other vegan sort of like products that can be a bit inferior or look a bit basic sometimes. So I think it's just making sure that our product is just as good or better.
But with consumer trends, we have noticed, and you guys have probably noticed this as well, that there has been a transition to more plant-forward menus in a lot of restaurants. And we've seen Mila open up during the pandemic as a vegan restaurant. We saw Doce reinvent House Special as a pretty much, I think it's about 95% vegan restaurant. We've seen Aleph Eatery go vegan. So that was really encouraging. And then we also have seen in the news a 3 Michelin star restaurant in New York recently convert to a vegan menu. So that is just like, well, I think the vegan movement is all stations go now. People that aren't vegan don't see it coming, really. But if you are in this space and watching what's going on, it's really positive. It's only set to grow. And we've been to these restaurants in Vancouver that have gone vegan during the pandemic, and they've been doing okay, to be honest, for all things considered, with the the restrictions and everything. I think they've been doing better than some of the restaurants in Whistler that have just had the same menu for 10 years and have just lots of animals on there, and they're just sitting there pretty much empty, twiddling their thumbs, all the staff laid off on EI, and it just seems like they're kind of going nowhere really. And then you look at these restaurants in Vancouver that have gone vegan, and there's definitely an energy about it. So I'm hoping that will start to transpire through the restaurant community, and people will start to take notice of that.
100%. And Ed, you kind of mentioned one thing that I'll point out if you guys want to touch on it a little bit more from a trend perspective. We've had other special guests, especially in the food space, talking about the trend of, environmental sustainability when it comes to packaging and all these other things. And you mentioned that early on, like you're obviously ahead of the curve, how you were already forward thinking about, oh, this is great. Like no plastic and it's coming in paper bags, it's going in paper bags. Did you want to touch on that at all? What you're experiencing?
I mean, we definitely, 100% of our packaging that we use is compostable.
Certified.
We keep it really simple, like brown paper. We're actually in the process now of upgrading using a Canadian company that's carbon neutral to do, but that's more to do with just printing. It will still be on 100% compostable packaging. We tried before the pandemic. It wasn't our servers asking, is that to go? It would be, was that for here? Do you want it in like, a ceramic cup? Just to try and avoid, even though like trusting people to take it out onto the street in front of us where there's lots of seating, that they're just going to bring it back because everyone knows that a coffee or tea tastes better in a proper cup than a paper cup. So we were trying to really sort of encourage that. And then once we hit the pandemic, we weren't allowed to use people's cups. Natasha came up with an idea of every coffee that we sold, we would plant a tree. So we're working with a company, a charity, Trees for the Future. And we've nearly got 10,000 trees. We've nearly planted 10,000 trees with those guys since working with them.
And we want to build on that year on year. And we have the metrics, how many trees we've planted on our homepage of our website. We have it on the coffee machine. So when people pick up their coffee, they hopefully see that. And we didn't charge extra for that. We took that out of our profit because we were kind of, it was kind of annoying that the health inspector's given us an hour health permit that says we can only serve in single-use containers. And we're not completely comfortable with using compostable packaging because there is still the deforestation, there's still the production, the transportation emissions, and then the end of the life of that product. We can't guarantee that it's actually being composted, even though it says it's PLA 7 approved. And there's a lot of sort of critics out there saying that it's just kind of greenwashing. So we're aware of that, and we're starting to look into other options that are maybe bamboo based or plant fibers, where we can guarantee the breakdown of that better. But it's kind of hard because the main sort of coffee cup that's out there is PLA 7 lined, and that's perhaps not compostable in a lot of places. So we're very aware of these things, and we're constantly trying to find a better alternative and networking and that kind of thing. So I don't want to make anyone think that we're perfect, but I think it's better just to get going with these things rather than just wait for the perfect scenario. The
interesting thing about it though is that it's not an opt-in option. We just do it for every coffee sold. Whereas when we looked at our analytics and our data, we found it was only between 5 or 10% per day of coffee sales of customers bringing in a reusable cup. So actually, when you look at that, it's very few people, 5 to 10 people potentially a day, that are trying to do the right thing and bring in their own cup. But actually now it's 100% of people are sort of, giving to this charity.
And I don't know how environmentally friendly reusable cups are either, because what I started to notice was people would open their car doors and a whole bunch of them would roll out and people leave them in places. I've been on so many hikes and found like water bottles and like coffee, reusable cups left in places. So you start to think like, what's the end cycle of those products as well? Are they recyclable? And you kind of start to question that, what is actually the perfect solution to getting a takeout coffee, really? It seems that any way you turn, there's kind of an issue. But as long as we're aware of those issues and keep trying to innovate and find people that are innovating and supporting them, then hopefully we will come up with better solutions.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled that we got to touch more on that, because that's such an important point. And I know that you guys are like we mentioned, ahead of the curve on that sense. So that's amazing. And what a unique way to not give an option to do good, to just make it happen. Yeah. I think that speaks volumes, and that mindset could be carried across a lot of different sectors, industries, avenues, forcing people to do good and not really giving them a choice that might actually end up being our solution for a lot of the big problems that we face. So absolutely wonderful. And you touched on trees for the future. We'll get to that in a moment, but this is, mine, and I'm sure a lot of other people's most exciting favorite question that we have for our special guests. And that is, where are you going? Where is your brand going in the future?
Well, we have a big, hairy, audacious goal of putting Whistler on the map as an eco-tourism resort. And, that could involve, I've got dreams of having a bear sanctuary, so we don't have any bears shot in Whistler, that they all get rehomed into a sanctuary, because at the moment, if the bears enter human territory and go through the bins or something, then there's only kind of one solution to that, and it's not very nice. And then also having a biodome and having people come here from all over BC, from off-grid communities, First Nations, teachers, and showing people more sustainable life practices. That's my dream. So what do we do to get there is kind of mapping out the plan. The first thing that we're looking into doing is becoming a B Corp. So we have this benefit mission actually embedded into our company, in our articles of incorporation, in all of our processes, and it's just kind of, we have to kind of formalize that first, I think, to be taken seriously and to build on that further.
That sounds incredible. Yeah. So if nobody's ever heard of a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, talk about one right there. We could all visualize that and see that. And that's why right off the top in the introduction, we talked about the fact that you guys are animal rights advocates, because that was sort of the first thing out of your mouth, right? Was how do we protect that side of the community? So it's absolutely remarkable. Okay, you briefly touched on Trees for the Future. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that and maybe any other charitable organizations that you support?
Yeah, we looked at, when we first thought about that, we thought about keeping it local within Canada, but the government does so much with tree planting and everything here anyway.
Well, also the cost of planting a tree in Canada might be $1.50, and that would actually mean that we would have to put the price up to incorporate that. So we kind of had to look at a more economical solution, but still allowed us to have an impact. And as far as I'm concerned, a tree planted anywhere on the earth is a tree planted, and the whole planet benefits. The nice thing about Trees for the Future is they work with farmers in sub-Saharan Africa who've got degraded land, and they actually opt into the program. So some of these tree planting ventures aren't actually as good as they sound. They can actually end up mass evicting a whole village and getting them out of there to put in a tree planting thing. So it sounds really good on the surface, but actually it can actually have horrible social consequences. So Trees for the Future, actually, they have farmers that sign up to say, look, my land is totally barren, I can't feed my family, and I want to regenerate it. And they go on a 5-year program with them, where they give them seeds and coaching, and they go and look at the land and make sure that what they're doing is right. And they also make sure that the people that pay for the trees, their trees are actually being planted. It's not just a seed that gets lost or forgotten about or doesn't actually germinate. So they have a lot of metrics involved. They plant the trees with farmers in 5 different countries. And what I really like about it is it's the home of coffee, Ethiopia. And so we're kind of paying it back. There are a lot of problems in lots of places in the world. But I think that some of the undeveloped countries have got the biggest, hardest problems. So it's kind of on the richer countries to give something back, not to undermine any of the problems that are in Canada or in other richer countries. But I don't think that you should always feel bad about giving back to somewhere just because it's not local.
Also, it's kind of cool because they're not just trees to be harvested, they're trees for shelter, for wind protection around the farm. And then they can grow vegetables to feed themselves and then take to the market. So I kind of like the fact that they're, like Tash said, they're being taught, there's education involved to feed themselves and then feed their community. So it's kind of like building a lifestyle, not just putting a tree up to be then, chopped down. It's for wind protection and shade and these sorts of things. So it's a really good charity. We're really happy to be working with them, and I think we'll continue to for years to come.
So that's the first charity that we have a formal agreement with, and we actually calculate metrics, but we have given sort of one-off donations to different local environmental and animal organizations. We did a fundraiser in December where Ed made doggy treats, vegan doggy treats that are human friendly. And we had to stop ourselves eating them all. And then we sold them, and 100% of profit, not even profit, 100% of the sale went to Happy Herd Animal Sanctuary. And when, with that, we didn't have a price on them. We had a minimum of donation, and we would say, how much would you like to donate? And then that sort of encouraged people to give more.
It was minimum $1, but then what you found is a lot of people, you know, double that or triple that sort of thing.
Yeah,
especially,
the animal lovers.
Especially being in December, you know, Christmas time, people are a bit more giving. So that would be something else that we could bring back and donate to.
Yeah, so that was about, that only got us about $370 worth. Then we've given $500 to WAG, which is Whistler Animal Shelter for Cats and Dogs. Then we gave another 500 to Aware, our local wildlife voice charity. And so we've given one-off donations, but what we need to work on, and this is what the B Corp is helping us with, is formalizing these agreements with certain charities and having metrics in place where you know, we're totally transparent and accountable for meeting targets and how much we've given. So we're very honest about all of that. It's still a work in progress. So as I said, we want to formalize these things more. We do have to say no to some people. We have a lot of the young people that are athletes. They ask us to sponsor them to do races, and I do support that. But I have to kind of think, you know, as our little business with a little pot of money, what's going to have the biggest impact on our mission? It's got to kind of really, it's got to help animals and planet and people as well, if possible. And when I look at somebody running a race, I kind of think, well, that's good for you, but what about the planet and the animals? And so I sort of wish them well, but you can't contribute to everything. But I think it's good to sort of pick what your mission is, and then make sure that your giving aligns with that so that you're on the right path with your mission.
Absolutely, yeah. And for those who don't know, back last year, Ed and Natasha were gracious enough to help donate to a Veganuary fundraiser that I put on. And in all of the years that I've been fundraising, especially, you know, the last quite a while since being vegan myself, I've encountered that with other businesses when I approach and I ask, you know, about some fundraising. And I really actually, at first I was kind of like, oh, that sucks. But I started to really appreciate it more when these companies did exactly what you said. They said, if it's not going to help the animals, then no. And I started to love that. And you're tugging on my heartstrings when you talk about the Happy Herd. If you ever go onto my Instagram under the photos by you section, it's all Happy Herd. And I also got to go to Ethiopia and have coffee ceremonies in multiple people's different homes, roasting the green bean all the way to a dark cup of coffee, which is incredible.
Wow.
These are not about me, so I digress. What is a book, podcast, or app that you guys think sharing with us? Because usually we kind of summarize these meetings in an email. So are there any books, podcasts, or apps that we can note down and share with our members and everybody else?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Vegan Business Tribe. It's a couple, David Pinnell and Lisa Fox. They're in the UK, but they've started this global network of vegan business owners, and they have a podcast. So their site is called Vegan Business Tribe. I highly recommend you become a free member and listen to the podcast. And then they also have a paid membership that has a marketing course on it that's very helpful. And also there's Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox. She is a fellow Brit but lives in Australia, and she has that podcast, and she also has conversations with vegan women leaders, I think it is. And also there's a couple of others. Business for Good is quite useful, and the BDC B Corp Effect I've started listening to recently, and they have Canadian B Corps on there. Not all of them are vegan, but it's interesting. They all have a sort of ethical mission. And there's also another one, I think it's American, it's called Awarepreneurs. So I've got lots lots to share with you. And the plant-based business podcast, that's by a group that had an event called Vivolution in London in the UK, and they interview business owners from all over the world that are all vegan as well. So I really like those. Any that you've got, Ed?
No, I enjoy all of those as well.
He likes Hip Hop Saved My Life, which isn't a business podcast, but it is hosted by a vegan comedian called Ramesh Ranganathan. So if you like hip hop and comedy, Ed recommends that one for your downtime.
So that's where all the amazing hip hop music gets embedded into your guys' Instagram stories. There are always these amazing tracks that I'm like, where, got to find that. So that makes total sense.
Cool.
Okay. So, maybe looking at this through the lens of either companies that you admire or aspire to, or maybe companies that have helped you on your journey. Are there any companies that you love to support and would like to shout out?
Well, we mentioned all those lovely restaurants in Vancouver. We're big fans of those. What I see in the vegan space is it's really exciting at the lower end. When you look at fast food and burgers, there's just like crazy development in that sector. But what I'm kind of interested in is catering for all across the board and looking at like the higher end places, the fine dining and stuff, because that is still a little bit behind the times with veganism. But I get it. It's like you want to appeal to the masses first and it takes time. But we don't want veganism to be seen as like junk food or cheap food or something nasty. We want it to be seen as like, oh yeah, there's no compromise, and that's kind of what we're about. But we like following like the Happy Pair.
Yeah.
An Irish couple of twins that have a load of businesses in Ireland. Like
Frankie, is it Frankie?
Frankie, we salute you in Kelowna.
He's the ex-chef from the Acorn. Really nice guy. Moved out there from Vancouver. He started the Acorn and Arbor. And he's a great guy, Brian. He's sort of like doing amazing things over in Kelowna. So if you ever find yourself out there, it's a really good restaurant. So I talk to him every now and then via social media and things. So
I like watching what Persephone Brewing are doing as well on the Sunshine Coast. They're B Corp certified, and they did have a little vegan bar in Vancouver. I think it's closed now, but I'm interested. I'm sort of watching them like, well, you're going to do something else like that, or you're going to do something in the vegan space? I hope so.
Yeah, the Snug.
The Snug, that's it. You might know it. And there's also a new company that we discovered recently that's really exciting in Vancouver, Chop Value, and they upcycle chopsticks into chopping boards and other things. And they have some really interesting sustainability facts, and what they're doing is incredible. So yeah, lots of different companies there.
Yeah, Chop Value is booming, and you guys are in wonderful company because we had Felix on as one of our special guests several months ago. So you guys are in excellent company. We just got a question here. Who are the twins in Ireland? You said that's the Happy Pair.
The Happy Pair, yeah, they're two brothers. They started out doing a fruit and veg sort of stall, and now they're huge. They've got multiple cafes, and they do a lot of products for supermarkets like dips, ready-made meals. It's a huge company. They've got their own podcast. They do a lot. They're very, very active.
Yeah, and Ed, you were a special guest with them, or they were a special guest with you on Instagram Live not too long ago as well.
Yeah, we did sort of a Q&A. They've got sort of a bakery section to one of their cafes that they make sort of sourdough and a lot of stuff. So, and we found out yesterday they are 100% vegan, except for they've got a few old school regulars that still want dairy milk, but apparently they are phasing that out.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked to find that they still serve dairy in their cafe, but at the same time, they're an old brand. They've been going like 20 years. And I feel that, way back then, vegan just wasn't an acceptable thing. And I feel like it's time for them to change that. Oh, and I should mention Matthew Kenny as well. Matthew Kenny is an incredible fine dining chef in California. and he has a huge, we're talking about 50 or more restaurants around the world that he's kind of involved in, a part owner. And his umbrella of businesses is really cool. And he has a cookery course on the Future Food Institute, I think it's called.
Yeah.
That's really good. We're actually halfway through it ourselves.
Yeah, it's a really good online course that you can take part in, and there's different modules and you just work your way through. And it's kind of nice because you take photos of what you've made, and then it sort of unlocks the next module. And they'll have online chefs that work for him that will comment and give you feedback, and other people that are doing the course around the world. So it's really inclusive. And it is for that sort of home cook, even chef level, to be honest. It's really good.
Well, that really gets my creative brain going and thinking that, Ed, you can monetize even further by creating your own sort of OG sourdough creator course for people, because to your point, obviously there was a boom in people being interested in about it, and then falling off. So maybe that's something that's in the future for you guys. And you briefly touched on it earlier, but we always preface this question by saying this is not the time to necessarily be humble or say, oh, I don't know if I'm the right person to be giving advice, because we're outright asking you for it. You guys have won awards. You're successful. It hasn't taken you too long at all to get to where you are. And it sounds like the moon is not even the limit for you guys. So with that being said, what is some advice that you have for business owners and entrepreneurs, whether they're new, in the middle of their journey, or maybe they are a 20-year business who needs to shake things up? Do you have any advice?
For me, I believed in our concept, and I know that we're both hardworking. And I think if you believe in your concept, you're willing to throw everything at it. And we very rarely take a day off, really. We'll go for a walk and say, okay, we won't talk about work, but within 10 minutes, it will come back round to something to do with work. So I think if you believe in your concept, then it will drive you and give you that dedication. And for us as well, we've put everything into it. We sold our house in the UK and borrowed a lot of money. So we've said on previous podcasts and things, it can't fail. We were basically like, if it fails, then we're young enough to recover. But at the same point, it's kind of, we've just thrown everything at it.
One thing I would say, which David Pennell at Vegan Business Tribe has really been making me think about, and I think he did a podcast on this that he released this week, is about finding your niche or niche. And he said it's not veganism, that's just your sector, because what we're seeing now is all of the brands are offering vegan options now. Almost every restaurant has vegan options, there's vegan everything, which is great. But for a business owner, it's not enough just to be vegan. You have to have a niche that's more niche than that. So for us, it's being a vegan sourdough bakery. That's our specialty. It's the sourdough, and we're in the vegan sector. But I think that's really interesting. He talks about being remarkable. You know, remarkable means people will sit around a dinner table and talk about you. So what are you doing that's making you remarkable? And if you follow along with his podcast or join the Vegan Business Tribe, you can learn a lot more about that. And it really makes you think, and that'll make you stand out against the big brands that are just trying to replicate what we've all been doing for years. So market yourself as well, like think big, learn about as much as you can about marketing. If you haven't got money, then spend time trying to get on podcast shows, writing to magazines or press releases, winning awards that will get you media attention, or just being nominated for them, telling your local paper that you know you're up in the top 10 or whatever. Just try and get as much publicity as you can, because you don't know who's going to see that and what opportunity they can provide for you. And we have actually had a lot of really cool opportunities because we've got our name out there. But we haven't had a whole lot of money for marketing. It's mainly been time spent.
Wow, beautiful. So everybody, you heard it here first. Advice from the special guest today is really establish a concept that you live, eat, breathe. You are it. You are the concept. You really, truly are and believe it. Niche within a niche, and then go all in and make it happen and make action and make it quick and pivot. And one piece of advice too that you mentioned way at the beginning of the talk, which was listen to the customers, listen to the customer feedback, and figure out what their perception is of what's going on. So, all right, absolutely remarkable conversation. You can find Natasha and Ed on Instagram at eds_bread. That's EDS_BRED. And you can find them online, www.edsbread.com. Thank you so much, Ed and Natasha. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
It's been great talking to you.
Perfect. So usually what happens now is we just kind of hit stop record, and then we kind of just do a popcorn style introducing